All right, welcome back to a special edition of the Dirty Verdict podcast. I'm one of your hosts, Peter Taaffe.
I'm your other host, Kyle Herbert.
And I'm the third host, Bill Ogden.
So you've noticed we're a little more serious than normal because we have a very distinguished guest today, District Attorney for Harris County, Kim Ogg. Thanks for joining us.
It's my pleasure.
So we like to, obviously, generally we talk about legal news stories one week and then we'll have guests, and we like to really interested in people's backgrounds and how they got to be where they are. And you obviously have a very distinguished and interesting background. So we'd love to talk about that, particularly with your kind of history here in Houston with public service and with your family. And then obviously you're in a election race right now. Today, actually, I think is the first day of early voting.
It is.
February 20th, and we're going to have this posted by this Friday. So we'll obviously would love to get your thoughts on some of the issues that are being debated between you and your opponent in the race, who we interviewed last week and got his take on some things, and just kind of go from there.
It sounds great. The dirty verdict, waiting for the jury.
When we have like normal, nice people on like yourself, we'll always have to preface it like, there's nothing dirty about this. Kyle and I sat in a bar one day to come.
I just don't get out enough. So I was intrigued by the name, and here I am.
It's we try to keep it PG. We try to keep it, we've worked with Bill with some consultants, and he's definitely lowered his curse word.
They just cut my mics. It's fine.
But yeah, it's just a catchy name. So I think probably the technical term is like if a verdict came from a jury and it wasn't, some tampering was involved or someone got, it was that was a dirty verdict. Mm-hmm. So, but we just thought we just wanted our merchandise to go to sell.
Yes.
So
which we don't have any of yet.
But sold out. We sold out.
I was going to say, so you're shameless self-promoters. I feel right at home.
Yes, perfect. Where'd you grow up?
I grew up here in Houston. I'm a native. I'm a child of a lawyer and a crime victim, it turns out. It's not how they describe themselves, but my folks were in public service. My dad was a state rep and a state senator. So I grew up at the footstool of the Capitol. And politics is, you love to hate it and you hate to love it. But as a lawyer, I'm cause-oriented, and I like fixing things, not just at the case-by-case level, but through broad policy strokes. And that's what public service allows you to do if you're lucky enough to be elected. So because I was a child of public servants, it's in my blood, which means I never meant to do it, but God takes notes.
So where'd you go to high school?
Memorial High School, class of 77. Started out over in Westbury at Andy Anderson Elementary School, and before that, my folks were on Telephone Road. So they are not rags to riches. They were rags to, middle.
Yeah.
What kind of attorney was your father?
He was a general practitioner. We don't have much of that anymore.
Nope.
And I got the chance to practice with my father, which, again, I thought I would never work with a family member. And I was a 20-year lawyer when I went to work with him, and he was a 42-year lawyer, and so we crossed his 50th while I was there with him. It turns out he was really smart, and he knew a lot more than I realized when I was in law school or when I was a young DA. I was fortunate to have an excellent trial lawyer and represented some big companies at the time. He represented Continental Airlines in some cases, and he was a prolific legislator. And I say my mom was a crime victim. I didn't think about the trajectory of my life. I didn't aim to be the district attorney. In fact, in high school, my friends might suggest that I would be least likely to be district attorney or room monitor.
Or maybe on the other side of crime.
It could be. I was a terrible criminal.
Yep.
And I was caught forging notes for money at Memorial High School and did some detention. I was caught cheating on a math test and did some detention.
Hey,
I was deterred.
Don't do the crime if you can't do the crime.
I was deterred. So I've been a failure at that stuff. I loved the law. The law was the search for the truth, and being a prosecutor kind of put you in the good guy's hat. And so my first job as a lawyer was as a line DA.
Wow. Where'd you go to college?
UT, and I majored in journalism, one of the world's most hated professions, right under law and politics.
Yeah.
Do you know Fred?
I'm thinking about selling mobile.
You hit all three.
Do you know Fred Zipp? He was an editor of the Statesman, and he's been a professor at UT Journalism School for a very long time. I used him as an expert in the Alex Jones case. We used him as our expert in journalism. He's awesome. Great guy.
So you were at UT from, would you say, 79 through?
No, 77 through 81. I came back to Houston right in time for the big boom. Mm-hmm. Everybody was making money. You could get jobs at a cocktail party. I didn't need to go to no stinking law school. I thought I could make money and make my way writing for a local paper. It was called Interview. And it was just a little local rag, even pre-Houston Press. And so that didn't work out. I worked in a lot of extra jobs to make ends meet. And when my folks suggested I go to law school, I said, absolutely not. They said they would pay for it. I said, let me think about that. And in about 5 minutes, it seemed like a good idea. Here's the really cool thing. Never having intended to be a lawyer, much less a DA, practicing law is my favorite thing, my favorite type of work that I can even imagine doing. I really love the law. We're supposed to get to the right outcome. Mostly we do. Sometimes we fail. But I think the whole purpose is to have a civil way of dealing with each other in society without killing each other. Criminal law is pretty base. You guys are in a different practice area. But you know how important it is to your clients to get justice. And what I've realized as I got older is that people can live without money. They can live with health problems. What they cannot live with long-term is injustice.
Sure.
And so writing that for people, whether you do it through a civil case or whether you do it through a criminal case, makes for a rewarding life.
Where did you go to law school?
I went to South Texas College of Law, Harvard on the bio.
Greatest law school there is.
Absolutely. How many alums am I surrounded by?
At least one.
Bill and Kyle.
Kyle, yeah.
Yep.
All right. Well, you got to be one of our more famous alums.
Oh, I try not to be famous. I do everything I can to not be famous, except this show.
Infamous.
Yeah, infamous.
Infamous.
I'm working on being infamous one day.
When you were in law school, did you know you wanted to do criminal work?
No, I just wanted to make money.
Fair.
And so I intended to be a trial lawyer. And the way you learn to be a trial lawyer is you go to the district attorney's office and you become a trial lawyer. On my second day, I was in trial. By the time I left 7 years later, I'd tried about 90 cases to juries and a lot of other things, hearings and things before courts. But you know how to conduct yourself, and it gives you a confidence that, you just can't get at a big civil firm. So big law back in the 80s was not huge on hiring women. I didn't have the grades anyway. And so the district attorney's office, government, hired a lot of women. And we were 50% even back then.
50% women lawyers?
In 1987 when I started, which is really remarkable if you think about it.
Who's the longest in DA?
Johnny Holmes.
Got it, yeah.
And so people think of him as a real conservative, which he was, and he had 50% women. And so they really helped me get hired in. And it was the victims that really sold me. I don't have to tell you lawyers that, everybody has a story and people are harmed and they need help. And that's what we do. And so I meant to stay 3 years and then go to a civil firm and make some money. And instead I stayed 7 years, and then I stayed in criminal justice after that. I went and ran the first anti-gang task force for Mayor Bob Lanier back in the 90s. Mm-hmm. And that was fun. I lobbied for him on juvenile justice and gang issues in Austin and learned about how to advocate at a state policy level. And we had a lot of success in changing the law and in advocating for victims' rights. And I think that made for a safer community. In the 80s, when I returned from school, Houston was in a crime crisis. We were considered the murder capital of the world. What a title. And that's why after only about 3 years at the DA's office, I was trying nothing but murders, rapes, robberies.
Wow.
And you meet so many people who are trying to get their case resolved so they can grieve, so they can move on.
Sure.
They're not in control. The police were in control of the investigation. The judge is in control of the schedule and the bond. And the DA is in control of what gets presented at trial. And what I've seen with crime victims, and the reason that they're so compelling, is they are the underdog in our system. We think of the government as having unlimited resources. We don't. And many rights go to the defendant. Crime victims have a Bill of Rights with zero relief if it's violated. Zero relief.
Yeah, and the Crime Victims Fund is kind of the only thing, and it's good. It's a tough tool to use in a lot of
instances. You only get reimbursement.
Right.
You know, your child is murdered. You get to bury them. You get to get counseling. And then the Attorney General's office can reimburse you. But it's really a underdog position. And most of them did not choose to be in the justice system. Everybody's real. So you're dealing with all kinds of people. I like people. They need help. And so it's much like personal injury law or small businesses that you're representing against Goliath and the corporation. I found it to be necessary. I found most advocates left for more money, and I liked the work. And so that's the only job I ever decided I would run for. And I decided about 20 years before I ran, that's the only political job that would be worth it.
When you started in the 80s, how many DAs were there?
There were about 200.
And how many do you supervise now?
Only 350.
Oh, so it hasn't really exploded.
No, that's kind of been a thing for me. I've really advocated for more lawyers. We're the lowest staffed DA's office in the top 20 cities.
Per capita or just overall?
Per capita and overall.
Wow.
Example, the boroughs in New York have more than 1,200 combined. Chicago alone has more than 1,000. And some of these jurisdictions have some civil responsibility. But by far and away, Houston has been starved in terms of our prosecutorial resources. And I like being an advocate against that. I've been criticized for it. I can't get along with people. You know, my thought is we live in an adversarial world, us lawyers. And so if you're representing a client at trial, you fight like hell for them. If you're representing the public and you're in charge of their public safety, you fight like hell for them.
I like to think of it as if everybody leaves pissed off, that's justice. If both sides are upset with it, then it was a good deal.
I qualify.
So I'm completely ignorant of how this works, as I'm sure the majority of people listening to this are.
We know Kyle.
My typical role. How do you pay? Who pays for all of the DAs? How do you get a bigger DA's office if you want one? Is that the state? Is that the county? Fill me in.
Yeah. So county government vexes people. They understand a mayor and city council.
Sure.
They have no clue what a county judge and a commissioner's court do. One, the county judge is not a judge. Two, the commissioner's court is not a court. And so they are the taxing and funding authority. They're not the taxing authority that's an actual authority, but they take all of our property tax dollars and they're responsible for funding everything in the county, just like the city is responsible, the mayor's responsible for funding everything in the city. So we have 5 commissioners, 4 are commissioners and 1 is a county judge, and they're sort of like 4 mayors of precincts. And then the county judge has emergency powers. That's basically what her role is.
And that's Lena Hidalgo now.
Yes.
I worked as an intern in Judge Russell Austin's court, in the probate court, when the county gave us the fancy new civil courthouse. And Judge Ed Emmett came over there to complain that Judge Austin was smoking cigarettes in chambers. And I think that was a pretty fair use of his emergency powers because it was a beautiful courthouse and there was no way they were going to get Judge Austin to not smoke. They did eventually get him to quit smoking on the bench, which was a great victory for the people of the
So, factoid, my father, Jack Ogg, passed many bills, bilingual education, the ERA, the death penalty. But the one we caught the most flack for at home was his no smoking legislation. In 1982, he carried a bill to eliminate it in county buildings. You could still smoke on airplanes.
Yeah.
You would think that he was for drowning little puppies because we got so many phone calls.
Cigarettes are delicious and good for you.
Back then, I think that people thought that.
Yeah.
You know,
I was just out of college when they decided to pass this smoking indoors ban. And I mean, we were in Austin pulling our hair out. We're like, what are we going to do if we can't smoke an entire pack of cigarettes right now?
Oh,
Smells a lot better. When
smoking was
Longer and
Yeah, it's really a
Date better.
great law.
I went to school in Huntsville. I graduated. It was still completely fine to smoke in both bars that are in Huntsville, Texas. So.
Well, there's freedom.
It's not anymore, apparently. But when I left in 2009, people were still just smoking inside.
So you've been an advocate at the county level to get more DAs. What do we need, in your opinion? Why aren't you getting them? And what's your goal for staffing up the way you want it done?
So our caseloads are unsustainable. We've got young lawyers right out of law school. By 3 years, they've had a fair number of trials, although those have been dramatically reduced after Harvey and COVID. So we're finally getting more trials, which gives them more experience. The ideal staffing would be 100 more, would have 450 per capita. That would be enough. Meanwhile, the difficulty for lawyers is staying up to speed with an unmanageable number of cases. And so we triage that out, and we offer a lot of alternative solutions for nonviolent offenders, not just to control the caseload, but because that was part of my platform. I want to keep people in the workforce. I don't want them convicted of possession of marijuana and not able to get a job or an apartment. I don't want them convicted of possession of controlled substance. So we've really tried to do something different with that end. But it leaves a lot of violent people who still need to be tried.
Sure.
So that's our focus. I think I lost track of your question.
Well, my question was, how many do you want to staff up? What's your plan for doing that, and what do you think we need?
So the plan is work with Commissioner's Court, keep presenting them data. You know, it's frustrating because they've spent over $30 million on studies by expensive out-of-town consultants, and that money could be used for the direct service that our lawyers provide. They've staffed up the public defender's office, which I support. But we need equal time for crime victims. Public safety deserves a normal, reasonable amount of lawyers. They say file less cases. Well, let me suggest to you that criminals drive the caseload. And so if you call in your burglary,
have you tried?
Call in your burglary and you call in your burglary, am I supposed to turn two of them down so that we can keep our numbers down?
Have you tried just asking people not to commit crime for a weekend?
You know, Greg Abbott's doing that with rapists, I hear.
Well, he ended rape in Texas. See, these guys make these faces. They don't want me to say things like this.
I'm terrified of what's about to come.
And you also
insurance.
You recycled that from the last interview. So he was more frowning at your.
Peter was in charge of defamation insurance. We're good.
Well, where was I with that?
Oh, you were talking about Greg Abbott.
She was talking about the caseload being unmanaged.
And I'm talking about funding. So everybody in government fights over the tax dollar. I want to tell you what's happening. The money in your government, at least at the county level, has in some part been diverted from infrastructure and public safety to special interest, and also to housing and health care initiatives. And I think services are great, but we see lots of murals and bike trails and non-essential expenditures that seem to be at the expense of public safety. That's what I've objected to. I like all those things. I'd love to ride bikes on a trail and look at murals, but I would like to do it without being robbed. And I think most people would. And so it's very important, if you want to do both, that you just ensure people's safety. And you do that through the presence of more people, both law enforcement at the street level, and then in the courts, we take the cases through the courts and try to hold people accountable. Why do we do that? Same reason I went to detention. Deterrence. They even have the same three letters. So you want to deter and change people's behavior, but I don't want to cripple their employability or their housing ability. So you have to be reasonable in your discretion and use of judgment. And that's what we train lawyers to do. And believe me, that's not an easy thing. They're right out of school. Some of them come many of them now, straight from college to law school without a lot of life experience. And so in reading through other people's real actions that affected other victims' real lives, teaching people how to make good judgments can only be done through supervision, training, I'd say lots of volume. And that's one good thing about the office is when we turn people over, they've got a lot of experience, and I hope they've got judgment that speaks well of the office. I know that our leadership really tries to set a good example.
Okay, I have a good buddy of mine. He talks about it. He's in your office. I don't know if I should say his name. Truett Rosane. You know Truett Rosane?
I do.
I've known him since, yeah.
He's the one that everyone says is really good.
Everything's cool, Truett.
Yeah, he's in. But yeah, he was one of those young, probably 4 or 5 years ago, he was a new person at your office, and he was terrified. And now I saw him the other day, and
it's terrifying.
Different person.
Face a judge. Think about it. You're right out of law school. You know, you don't know if you went to South Texas College of Law, you know you better stand up.
He went to like a smart people school. I think he went to Indiana.
I'm not sure they know to stand up.
They don't. He does now, though.
Yes, well, you learn.
So you worked for Johnny Holmes.
Yeah.
Who is he the DA that had the handlebar mustache?
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay. And then was it Charles Rosenthal?
It was. I did not work.
You didn't work
Chuck.
for him?
No. We had a period of instability at the DA's office that I feel like my last 2 terms have set right. But we had about 7 DAs in about 8 years.
After Charles Rosenthal?
Yeah. Chuck resigned because of a scandal involving racist emails and campaign emails and all kinds of things going out from the district attorney's desk, internally and externally. And
I remember that.
He just passed. And so it unfortunately left the office in a real crisis. Pat Likas was elected.
Right.
The culture of the district attorney's office was resistant, I think, to some of her ideas and plans.
Was Pat a Republican or a Democrat?
She was a Republican.
Okay.
And she was a Republican judge. But, you know, judging is a solo sport. Leading the DA's office is a team effort. And there was friction there. She was a great DA. She left. She was beaten in a primary election by Mike Anderson. He died within 8 months of taking office, 9 months of taking office. God rest his soul. His wife was appointed, Devin Anderson. I ran against her. I lost in 14.
Wasn't she also a judge?
She was.
Yeah.
Yes. And so she was appointed, and D.A. Anderson did a good job. I ran against her in 14. I closed the gap in points, and then in 16, I defeated her, and I became the first Democratic DA in over 35 years.
Yeah.
So
People didn't know what to expect.
Yeah.
So between the side, you were with Mayor Lanier on the
Yeah, I ran the first anti-gang task force, and believe it or not, it was a scare for people in Houston. They didn't know what drive-by shootings were in the early 90s. They didn't understand why somebody wearing red would be shot by somebody wearing blue. And we did a ton of community awareness, and it gave me a little bit of a profile outside of the courtroom.
And then after that,
Crime Stoppers, I ran it for 6 years. It's a nonprofit.
You ran Crime Stoppers?
I did.
I didn't know that.
I did, and I learned how to catch fugitives. It turns out that the media is actually effective and helpful when they want to be. And they helped us a lot by showing pictures pre-internet on media, and our reward and the anonymity that we promised and got passed through the legislature, that was a powerful tonic. So for 2 years in a row, we caught over 1,000 people each year. And those were, I mean, think about it. Those were not drug cases. Those were aggravated assaults. They were murders. They were robberies. They were rapes. So I was proud of that work. It is not a way to get rich. So I went to practice law with my dad.
Good.
I first worked for a guy named Don McFall. Y'all know Don?
sure.
I do not.
Yeah. So I worked for Don and for Ken Brightbill, and I tried to learn how the business of law worked, and those guys were super. I really learned a lot. My dad invited me to come over about a year and a half later, and I had this great experience with my father. And I'd urge any of you, if you have kids in the business, that it was just the most unique thing to see your parents or your family member's mind at work. I just grew so much more respectful of my father.
Yeah. You get to, you get
Really
to,
good lawyer.
You see him not be a dad and be a lawyer.
Yes, I stopped calling him Dad because it's embarrassing around clients. So I called him Jack, and to the day he died, I was still calling him Jack. And God rest his soul, I miss him.
So I want to ask a question about some stuff that's been in the news the last election cycle as well. So the DA's office has a lot of discretion on the kind of cases to bring. You mentioned that earlier about relatively small drug possession cases. And our legislature has been kind of meddling with that, I think by passing laws that are intended to take that discretion away.
Yes.
What do you think of that? What's that about?
Okay, there's a national movement to limit the discretion of district attorneys following a national movement by elected district attorneys to make political statements in their professional and official capacity. Example, the district attorney of Baltimore listed 38 types of crimes that she would not prosecute. It's caused great consternation with the police and with the community, but they elected her, and it was her prerogative to reject on a wholesale basis those cases. Our oath here in Texas says we're going to follow the law, uphold the Constitution, and not just the law of the United States, but of Texas, which means our oath doesn't require us to file a case, but it prohibits us from saying we will never file a certain type of offense. There were 5 district attorneys, all friends in major urban areas, who were encouraged to sign a political letter saying they would never prosecute abortion. Well, I'm the only woman among those people who signed the letter, and I didn't sign because I knew it was a trap. The legislature utilized that letter to then pass a bill that they literally call the rogue DA law. And it prohibits us from having any written policy like the DA in Baltimore, where we say we will never prosecute a certain type of offense. I found that always and never to be in violation anyway. But I thought it was a mistake for an organization to, and they did, and several organizations did, encourage these DAs to use their position for a political statement. All it did was bring trouble to the women of Texas. And now, such a statement, and my opponent's been making them, he will never prosecute abortion, is actually grounds for removal of the district attorney and reappointment of a new district attorney by our governor, which would mean, in all likelihood, a pro-life DA at the expense of Harris County women. We don't need to use politics to do our job as district attorneys. I just don't think we do. Our discretion is our judgment. It's certainly fallible, but it shouldn't be legislated into a corner.
Practically speaking, I'm aware of one case that touched on this abortion issue. Are many of those cases making their way through the courts?
Zero of those cases are being investigated by our police department because our police chief has declared that that's his lowest priority. He also, I think, understands the ramifications of saying never. It's kind of like saying always. Basic therapists will tell you that's probably not a good idea.
Low priority is a good way to put it.
There you go. And that's what he did. And so the police drive the case investigations, and there are none. The one abortion case that was filed was not actually an abortion case. It was a man who gave his wife an abortion-inducing substance without her knowledge. And her child was born premature. They were in a divorce. It's a complicated case, and it's resolved. He was sentenced to probation. He was a lawyer, first offender, so wasn't likely to go to prison.
I know who he is.
And I wanted to ask just about that one, because that is a case that obviously abortion's a big deal right now. It has been for a long time in our politics. That's a case that got a fair amount of media attention.
Let me remind you, it's also called the third rail. Yeah. So, tread lightly.
Well, my simple question is this. Lots of folks in the national media were looking at that case and holding it in opposition to the Attorney General prosecuting women for medically necessary abortions, and drawing this dichotomy between what people perceive as a light sentence for this lawyer in Houston as opposed to chasing women out of the state of Texas who need abortions. it's not a fair apples to apples comparison, obviously, right? They're two totally different things. But it's got a lot of attention.
It's gotten a lot of attention because I'm in the middle of a hotly contested race that's funded by basically three people who are putting out an enormous amount of negative publicity about our office, and anything with the word abortion in it plays to my opponent's advertising campaign and alleged position. And so what I would tell you is, for a first offender lawyer to come in and plead guilty with 105,000 cases pending, get a final conviction on him, well, it's deferred, but get the opportunity to have a final conviction on him, get him to admit guilt, which he had denied for several years. It wasn't a plea bargain that was satisfactory to everybody, but that was what our prosecutors thought in their best judgment what they could get in that court, and they did it. And, it's easy to play armchair quarterback. I try not to.
So, totally understand.
We discussed the case, and I support their decision.
Grading another lawyer's grading another lawyer's homework, something I really try to avoid.
I'm really good at it, though.
Well, that's really the basis for what we do here, but...
So your last answer, kind of touched on a segue point, which is like, what'd you do to piss off the Chronicle?
The Chronicle clearly has jumped into the election arena with both feet like a 50,000-pound gorilla, and they've unleashed about 3 female reporters who do nothing, it seems, but report negatively on me. They ignore the evidence and the data that we provide them. They don't quote our lawyers, and their stories always seem to be written before they get to us, and they seem to follow my opponent's campaign plan. So I can't answer for the Chronicle. I can only tell you that they're my hometown paper. They were my first job when I was 16, and I have real concern about their political motives. They used to be a news organization, and they still should be.
So give you a chance to toot your own horn a little bit of some of the accomplishments. Bill was pointing out to us before you got here.
I did some research, first time ever.
So I'll let you deliver the good news, Bill, as opposed to me stealing your thunder.
So by your research, you mean you went to Chat GPT?
Possibly.
Yeah.
You never know.
Okay.
I'm a wild card. But so when I look at the news now, it seems like there's more high-speed chases and all this stuff. And so when you decided you would come on, I was excited. And we researched, and crime is significantly down since you've been in office. And I don't feel like I didn't know that, and I feel like I'm one of the people that should know that. So what is your take on why that's been successful since you've been the district attorney?
So the DA actually has very little impact on the actual crime rate, except in one category. I have opposed the release of violent offenders on bail in the face of a very strong national push for cashless bail, which means a defendant has no skin in the game. He promises to come back to court. Let me suggest that doesn't always work out.
We've seen.
And so I had clients when I was a defense lawyer working with my dad. A long weekend was hard for them to stay out of trouble. You leave people on the street on bail for 3, 4, 5 years.
You're preaching to the choir.
And they get into trouble, and they also hurt people. And so my efforts to stop what was called bail reform was to protect the public. I was always for the release of low-level offenders on PR bonds. No reason for them to stay in jail, never was. And so, unfortunately, in politics, everything gets dumbed down. So I would say there's a lot of misinformation about my position on bail, and it's real simple. I'm for public safety, and so nobody should be kept in jail just because they're poor, and nobody should be released without proper consideration for the victim and the rest of us who are out here living on the streets with people.
And y'all don't determine that, right?
No, the judges determine bail, but there's a lot of misinformation. In fact, many folks, both Democrats and Republicans, mistakenly believe that the district attorney sets bail. And our judges really have not liked our insistence that this is their responsibility. And we've done that publicly because there was so much misinformation. So it's perceived as blame. It's not blame. They're responsible for their records. I'm responsible for mine. But it is important that the public understand the DA does not set bail. We simply argue and advocate for public safety, just like the defense attorney will argue for the best interests of their client.
Sure.
What's the day-to-day look like for you? Like, how do you spend your average day, 5 days a week?
I do a lot of public appearances at all kinds of civic associations to educate the public, chambers of commerce. I'm continually trying to engage our business community because they drive the train. And when the business community decides enough is enough, we get some results. The work I do daily has a lot to do with policy, but it always begins with one case. So by the time something comes up through the chain of command, from a trial lawyer to their supervisor and up, there's 3 or 4 layers. If it gets to me and the rest of leadership, it usually means that it's not a one-off problem. The abortion case was a one-off issue.
Yep.
And so that was a meeting we held on one case that only really impacted one case. But we often meet on cases that have a much broader impact. Example, our trial lawyers in our child abuse division were having a hell of a time getting DNA results on child sexual assaults. Well, our adult sex crimes, I learned, was having a lot of trouble getting their DNA results. Then the murder squad started telling us about the problem they were having getting ballistics. Now, ballistics are older than Dragnet. So, like, what's up with the lab? Well, the lab has been behind, and they've had staffing issues, and I understand those are nationally common, much like our staffing problems are common in terms of trying to keep people, recruit them, all that. But they are so far behind that what can happen is if we don't outsource some of those some of those tests, we're not going to be ready for trial. And the judges have a right to call us ready. We have a responsibility to be ready, and yet the evidence is not in our control. It's in the city of Houston's lab or the county of Harris's lab.
Who's in charge of that?
There's 3 labs. There should be 1.
Wait, there's 3 labs?
There's 3 labs. There's the state lab, which handles small municipalities, Tomball, Pasadena. There would be big cities elsewhere, but they're small compared to Houston. Then you've got the city lab, handles all HPD, and then you've got the county lab that handles the constables and the sheriff's department. So we support 14,000 cops, and the meat and potatoes of our job is the intake of cases, the drafting of the pleadings, the processing of the cases, but we have a heavy human component to it. So we're calling victims, we're getting proof of restitution. There's a lot of that goes on. In the most serious cases, we're totally dependent on the labs. Every case has a lab. I mean, watch CSI, right? And phones, the number one, I think, most valuable piece of evidence in the modern world, after DNA, there's really very few resources. We run our own lab because there's so few resources to crack those phones. And the phones have where the suspect went, what he browsed.
Not a Bill's phone.
Who he talked.
Bill has like apps to block all.
I use a flip phone still.
Cricket phone.
Yeah, you're right.
So those are the types of things we do. We'll get a case problem, but my job is to see if it affects the broader body of cases and people in Harris County. And then if there's an obstacle, that's the way, right? You got to fix it. So I love the solutions part of the job.
So you self-created a tech division?
We did.
Because you were just tired of waiting for cell phone
Because there
downloads?
were no other resources. I didn't create it. It was created a few years before I got there.
Okay.
We've expanded it. But we process hundreds of phones each year, and they are always critical pieces of evidence.
Yeah.
So along those lines, so you came in January 17th.
Yes.
January 2017. Since then, what have you done to change the office? What kind of initiatives are you proud of and you think have had good results that result in lower crime in Harris County?
the first thing I did was diversify the office. It was really kind of a Wayback Machine, and we diversified it ethnically, racially, geographically. I brought in leadership, and we started heavily recruiting from not just 2 law schools in town, but 3 law schools in town. And so we're one of the biggest employers at South Texas and at TSU. I went to work on marijuana. I contacted all of the chiefs of police, and we got an agreement. Unlike the DAs who issued a list of offenses they wouldn't pursue, I went to the chiefs and we talked about how their guys and gals were wasting 4 hours every time they arrested somebody. And they were doing it 10,000 times a year, which meant in 10 years, 100,000 people had criminal records for weed. I didn't want that. And so I used my goodwill and my political honeymoon to work out a deal with the local chiefs to stop arresting people and just send them to a class. We paid for a lot, safes to keep the contraband, all the information about the classes. We even set up the classes and paid for them. But it kept 10,000 people who are not really criminals out of our system every year. That's a huge accomplishment. Third thing is we went to work on mental health. We had people who would come to our jail, about 4,000 a year, and they would stay for an average of 4 months on a trespass case. The maximum sentence is 6 months, and I can't really imagine anybody getting that for trespass, but they were incompetent. They needed mental health.
Mentally ill, homeless folks.
Yes, mainly. So what we did is we worked a deal with Judge Emmett, with people on both sides of the aisle in Austin, both Senator Huffman and Senator Whitmire, to get the funding, and we worked with the Mental Health Authority. And their leader is a guy named Wayne Young. He's brilliant. And what we do now, I went right back to the police chiefs and said, okay, it's working with marijuana. Let's try it with the mentally ill. And that's a little different because that guy's already in the car cuffed. They're taking him to jail, but they have to call us first. And what we say is, this one has a mental health history. So that was new information. The total linchpin in helping fix our mental health criminal law intersection was getting the records from the mental health provider. And once we were able to link that with our criminal records, it's easy. You can see he's been treated 16 times at public health facilities. He's been in and out. Let's help this guy. So they take him to a respite center, and he can walk out, but most don't. I mean, they get a hot shower, they get stabilized, they get back on their meds, they get food. It's a good thing. And so both of those accomplishments, marijuana and mental health, have changed the landscape of our criminal justice system. And we did that. And let me just say, you're only as good as your team. I have great people who work for me, really talented prosecutors, MBAs, CPAs, people who had other careers too. And I'm really proud of the work that we did for our fellow Houstonians. No matter how everything comes out, that's made a major change. And the diversification changed the culture. I know my opponent wants to bring back a lot of people who left the office when I came in. Well, you're welcoming back, a different perspective. They're all good lawyers, and if he does that, I think you'll see another change. So we got to see how the election comes out. All I can tell you is I'm fighting like hell every day, and we've got, this may be my third term. I will tell you the job pays almost $98 an hour, and I hear you can get your picture in the paper.
Really?
And
fancy.
So, the glamour of the job is not what drew me to it. It was helping people that I wanted to do, and I felt like I had a special skill set. And that's what I've done. So, this is my 8th year. We'll see how the campaign and the election turn out.
When's Election Day?
March 5th, but it started today. Vote, vote, vote.
Did you vote yet?
No, I haven't voted. It's funny, I'm superstitious. I always vote on Election Day.
Day of.
Always.
I'm a day over.
My parents are. I'm always early. Okay, so
and that says so much about you guys as lawyers, doesn't it?
Mm-hmm. Kyle's a man.
Change your socks in trial?
I do. Like each
No
day?
underwear questions.
Yes. Yes, I change each day.
you don't wear socks.
No, I do. I just don't wear the same.
Appreciate it.
I wear the same type of sock every single day in trial. Just a Target navy blue gold toe sock.
I have to say, when I'm in trial, I am so focused on
Do you remember socks?
So just like you said, you have a great team.
I do.
And like the people that work here, they know when I'm in trial, I should be treated like a fourth grader. Like I'll forget my glasses, I'll forget a tie. There's a lot of people with every successful trial team that contribute to the most basic stuff.
Amen to that. And that's true for the job of DA. I'm so grateful. I had a lot of older lawyers come back and work with me. Almost all of us started at the DA's office in different decades, 70s, 80s, 90s, 2000s. But we were of the culture, and we understood the culture, and we knew what we wanted to change in the culture. And so I think that's probably the most important thing, is that our attitude is very victim-centric. And it comes from my mother's experience. I told you she was a crime victim. She was kidnapped when I was a child.
Wow.
And she was kidnapped by a serial rapist in downtown Houston who forced her into her own car. He bum rushed her as she was getting out. She was a legal secretary, going to make a deposit. He bum rushed her, had a big hunting knife, and drove her down Main Street in her car and told her a lot of terrible things, how he was going to rape and murder her. And my mother didn't tell me these stories. I read about them in articles about this incident that I found in my grandmother's nightstand after she passed. And other relatives told me about it. And my mother didn't hide it. She was real tough. We called her blood or bones because she'd always say, don't come running to me unless I can see blood or bones. So she was way tough. And she got that because she escaped by jumping out of the car at about 40 miles an hour. And it could have killed her, and it just didn't. And so he kidnapped and raped 2 other people. So when I say I was raised by a crime victim, it's not that I knew it. It's that they carry a lot of scars.
It changes you.
It does. It changed my parents' trajectory. Instead of, joining the Peace Corps, my dad went into politics as a lawyer. And he was going to travel the world and I think, try and help people. And instead he went into politics and became a policymaker and a trial lawyer. And my mother...
How long was he in the legislature?
18 years.
All in the Senate?
No, 3 terms in the House of Representatives and I think 3 terms in the 3 terms in the Senate. He ran for Attorney General, was beaten in 82. And my mother was glad. She wanted him to get back to work at the law firm. So that's how that went. But he lived to swear me in as district attorney.
Nice.
Wow.
And the person that replaced him in the Senate was current mayor John Whitmire.
That's right. Yeah. John Whitmire held the seat for another 40 years.
Yeah. Was Whitmire's run the longest in the history of the Texas Senate?
I don't know of anybody that served longer.
Didn't he run for it when he was just out of high school?
He was 22. He was in law school when he ran for the House of Representatives.
Yeah. At U of H?
Yep. And he won.
Yeah. And he's done it. When he was in the Senate, he did it. A lot of his pet projects were criminal justice stuff.
Yes. He was the chair of the Criminal Justice Committee for years. He's the one, he just passed in his last term a bill that prioritizes murder trials. Why do we need that? Because they weren't getting tried. And as evidence gets older, as witnesses disappear, memories fade, and mostly, I told you, people can't live with injustice.
Yeah.
Okay, that was my mother. That that unjust thing that happened, I think she was trying to make it right her whole life. That guy got caught after he raped 2 other women. He did time in the penitentiary, but it definitely changed her. And I think it was the injustice of being taken against your will and brutalized. And I'm glad that the worst didn't happen to her. But when she was dying, I was sitting with her. She had cancer and she didn't have her hair. And she had a huge scar, like the size of your hand, on the back of her head. And I realized, that's what she got when she jumped out of the car and escaped the rapist. And, all the crime victims have scars like that. You just can't see them. I see the trajectory of my life and why it was meaningful to me to help other people like my mother. So, sometimes it takes a long time to figure out why you are who you are. But that's definitely a part of it. And I think that's a big reason. It's not why I ran for DA, but it certainly had a big influence on the way we train our lawyers to be victim-centric.
DA, favorite job you've ever had?
Oh, yes. It's, again, no matter what happens, it's been well worth it to help as many people as we have. Just the marijuana offenders. Just the marijuana offenders, plus the mentally ill.
Here.
But plus the...
Are you saying here for the mentally ill or for the marijuana?
Definitely the marijuana.
I'm here for everybody. All of them.
But, we've done a lot on felony drugs. We have a whole felony drug court. I didn't start it, but I expanded it. And so you're seeing people who were treated like criminals, but who were not really criminals. They committed a violation of the law, but they aren't criminals. I wanted to focus on the bad guys, and we have.
Let me ask a quick question about trends in the office. I tried a case out in Hempstead a couple of weeks ago, and it's a court of general jurisdiction, right? So they got all the criminals in one room with all the civil lawyers, right? It's a totally new experience
God,
for me.
I get so scared.
I know you do. Well, there's female prisoners there too.
Those are the most terrifying ones.
I feel like I don't want to say they're interested, but they're, it's terrible.
Yeah, that's what you want to say.
This is my question. The bailiffs there and the sheriff's officers were talking about, an exploding rate of criminal prosecutions for methamphetamines and fentanyl. Just a ton of it.
Right.
Are there similar trends going on in our city?
So we are seeing a huge impact by fentanyl, but it's not in the number of cases we're filing. It's in the number of deaths that it's causing. So we get about 4,000 controlled substance cases every year. They all go through a drug court run by Judge Brock Thomas, who does a great job, and Mirza Sharma, our prosecutor, who's been there 6 years. These are great people. They are dedicated to saving people, and they do. But what they tell me is that they have people on their docket who die. They're addicted. They can't stop. They die with the needle in their arm or the wrong pill. Here's the interesting thing that's happening. I think that drug enforcement and prosecution has been a real dead end for decades. Always the low-hanging fruit, always going after the people in possession of small amounts. We would prosecute them. It did nothing to really affect the crime rate. It got a lot of neighborhoods bad names, ran the real estate value down, but it didn't really improve public safety. Now, fentanyl, dealing it, if it causes death, you can be charged with murder. So here's what that's done. It sounds draconian, but it's shifted the focus of law enforcement from condemning the user, well, he deserved it, he took it himself, to
The enabler.
looking for, wait a minute, who sold him the drug and who sold them the drug? And if you follow the money, what you see is that people are making millions of dollars off the misery of others. I'm for prosecuting those people. And the fact that I've now got a murder statute to do it, to me, makes drug prosecution suddenly extremely relevant. We can take a big dent out of the deaths that are being caused if we get the right dealers and manufacturers. So we've seen that trend. It's new. It's interesting. It's like what's happening with human trafficking. Prostitutes were called prostitutes. They received no respect in the system. It's only been in the last few years that people have started to see them as the crime victims that they really are. They really are. And we're trying to help them and go after their traffickers. So going up the chain of criminal responsibility is awesome because you get to the real bad guys.
And that's kind of a new thing on the fentanyl is that it used to be you'd hear fentanyl overdose, but that's not really what happened. It was the person took a Xanax or something like that.
Cocaine.
That was tainted with fentanyl. So that law has now changed to give you guys more authority.
It has.
To charge people with murder for that kind of thing.
It has, and it's necessarily changing the attitude of the police who investigate it and the attitude of the prosecutors and perspective of the prosecutors who take those cases to court. And here's why people care. It's happening to 12 and 13 and 14-year-olds, and you can hold people accountable, but children are children, and they do dumb things. And and it shouldn't kill them. And so that's happening across every socioeconomic group. It's the deaths of all these young people who thought they were taking Adderall, Xanax, anything other than fentanyl. And now, at least in the drugs we see, we used to plead them individually because we have to, based on the lab results. But we don't get those lab results now for quite some time. Now we plead everything as meth and fentanyl for the most part because that's what my prosecutors tell me is in damn near every single case that they pick up.
Jeez.
So, yes, there's trends. We're just trying not to the users pay a criminal penalty. They get arrested, but we're trying to work them through a treatment part of the system, not a penal part of the system. It just doesn't do any good. We got lots of murderers we can put in prison instead.
Yeah, there's no people in prison.
Right.
Are there, we asked your opponent this because, he talked a lot about, I think there's leadership challenges there. And so that's all well and good. And I don't mean to discount that, but really regular people just care about, am I safe? Or are people, being arrested for the things they should be arrested for? And if they're, not unfairly targeted and that kind of thing, do you have like key performance indicators or some kind of metrics that you try to strive for and achieve to do that? Or is it just something that is so esoteric and so much is beyond your control and that, tons of people are coming to this county every year, good and bad? We don't really have and this isn't McKinsey consulting. We can't apply that to this.
No, but lawyers' performance can always be evaluated. Their preparation can always be evaluated. A lot is based on how much training we provide them. What's the quality of that? So we have metrics in all of those things, and they don't just focus on convictions. And that's because, by definition, a district attorney is to seek justice, not just convictions. It's literally in the statute. On the other hand, we want to win our trials, and we want to judge them appropriately. We don't always win, but we mostly win. And so trial metrics are one way. Did you exercise good judgment in how you handled the case in preparation? And, we have a lot of problems in the system that we can't control. But the lawyers can always control the notice to their supervisors in the court. Hey, we don't have the evidence. They won't tell us how long it's going to take to test it, et cetera. So there are plenty of objective factors that we look at. You and I, all of us know it's really the heart of a trial lawyer. It's the heart and the judgment. And so much is based on experience that when people make decisions that we don't agree with, yeah, there can be some gnashing of teeth, and I can certainly call them in. But unless they intentionally did something wrong, it's really a learning moment. Yes, I may armchair quarterback. I would have done differently, and I'm the DA. And I think sometimes that's portrayed by others as being tough on people. It's the only way they learn. What you don't do is discipline them for judgment. You discipline them if they do something intentionally wrong. You train them if you disagree with the judgment.
I tell the lawyers that work for me and basically the whole staff, I'll never criticize you for making a decision that turns out to be wrong. I will criticize you for refusing to make a decision.
Yeah, amen. You got to move the case along. That's the responsibility of the lawyer, and we're the moving party in every single criminal case. By the way, there's 100,000 of them each year that we file. And so...
do we have enough criminal courts? Do we have enough judges?
Oh, they've just added 3, and they're going to add 3 more, but we lack the lawyers sufficient to fill them. You can't just hire lawyers who can try murders and capital murders right off the street. There's a learning curve. So the lack of funding to build our staff is going to be more evident as those new courts come online. We're keeping up, and we've got good new judges trying cases. That's exciting. That keeps our people there. When the judges weren't trying cases, it's a hard place to work. You're working for low salary, long hours, and no trials. Wait a minute. I came here to learn how to be a trial.
I remember when those criminal judges were over in the civil courthouse. Ugh.
Taking your trial dates?
Spots.
Yeah, that was tough. And that was the decision of the Commissioner's Court not to repair our courthouse for 4 years.
Yeah.
It really impacts things. So
is the criminal courthouse, is it haunted? Is it on Indian burial ground? Why does it flood nonstop? I know you didn't build it.
Poltergeist comes to mind. No, I think a committee of people built it, and that's probably the problem. I had the architect to my office after it flooded in Harvey, and he said two things. One, I didn't bring a lawyer, and my memory's not very good. And we talked anyway with those two considerations in mind.
Yeah.
And he was candid. He said that the parking lot that the judges sought underneath the courthouse was kind of a problem budget-wise, and the commissioner's court wouldn't give them any more money. And I think that the compromise between what the judiciary wanted and what the court would pay for, you got the criminal courthouse. And so
The ugly Frankenstein
we all hate
stepchild.
it. It's a bad building. You guys got the good building. Well,
It's way better.
I think there was a different planning process.
More than likely.
Bad elevator, though, I would say.
Well, we
think
just have
you can
less.
have-
We
We at least
have,
got the escalators. We didn't even get the escalators.
we have way less elevator usage at ours than theirs.
Yes.
So
Much.
And it could be worse for all of us. We could be practicing family law over in the Family Law Center. You know, bond was passed to build a new courthouse years ago.
Like
the white one?
Yeah.
Yes.
I worked in that building for 2 years.
You did. Yeah, the probate courts are over there.
Well, they were back then. I don't. There might be one or two there now, but yeah, it had like a cafeteria in the basement.
Yes.
and the grease trap had never been cleaned or replaced, so the entire building
Yeah,
smelled.
but when you're starving,
yeah, you walk by there and you're like, I'm gonna have a cheeseburger right now.
I practiced a bunch of family law during the time I was in civil practice with my dad, just because he was a general practitioner that come through the door, and it made criminal law seem so clean and easy.
Oh, yeah.
When you're messing with people's children and their bedrooms and their bank accounts, they will kill you.
Yeah, want to see some people really tear each other apart? Go sit in on a probate hearing.
I got all of our staff. We sent them all to concealed weapon school.
Really?
Yeah, because it's always the family lawyers who get it. Occasionally, the criminal lawyers get it too. And let me say, this job has not been without its threats. And a lot of our prosecutors who are young, I think that's a very hard thing for them to deal with. There is actual danger. And we do our best to protect them. We get a threat report. I'm always, again, urging the Commissioner's Court to get us more security downtown. But I do think it's worth saying that some of your public servants, they really get threatened. They're scary threats. Their families are vulnerable. And these kids and young lawyers work for, and some of us old lawyers too, work for little money, long hours, and they really work for you all. We get a lot of true believers. That's who comes to that kind of job. That's who I was and still am. And so I'm grateful to them. And the law schools really help. We're big employers.
I did not get a pre-commit letter from Pat Lycos. She's still on my shit list. So
Well, you seem to have handled yourself
I did okay.
pretty well.
I did okay.
Been a blessing.
No, it probably was.
And there's time.
I know.
Say is you might consider offering this bright young lawyer a position.
Hey, year and a half, and I'm open.
He just wants something to the ground level.
I've taught a bunch of your prosecutors.
He's seen that movie Raising Arizona. He knows all about recidivism. He's ready. He's a hot commodity.
Hey, they want to hear about your case. You ought to come talk to our lawyers about.
I'm happy to come talk to y'all.
Well, you've tried one of the most, famous cases, certainly that happened last year, and one of the most famous of the new century.
Yeah, Mr. Joe's made it kind of easy on us. It was not hard to make that an exciting case. He did it for us. So
Well, did you send him a thank you note?
nope, we're still in bankruptcy court, so I can't directly contact him. Just
Sends you some more money, you'll send him a thank you note.
yeah.
No, it's an awesome verdict.
Thank you.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
So you've been very generous with your time. We appreciate it. But we wanted to give you an opportunity to kind of give your closing argument why. One, first of all, thank you for your service for the last 6+ years. Recent service. You did it a lot before that. But second, we wanted to give you a chance to just give a closing argument for the voters of Harris County. We've told everyone in this county, if you want to have a say in elections, you really need to vote in the Democratic primary. If you're a Democrat, of course, but even if you're not, you should really think about doing it
For county races.
for county.
It's absolutely true. And of course, you don't, there's no scarlet letter if you cross over from the Republican Party to the Democratic Party. The Democrats did it quite a bit in the 90s and 2000s. And so this is a way to affect the government that's going to affect you. So in closing, I'm the only district attorney in the history of our institution that had to deal with both a hurricane and a worldwide pandemic. These things shut our world and our courthouse down, and as a result, a huge backlog of cases built up. Under my leadership, we've worked through that backlog and gotten it down from 148,000 to 105,000. How do we do that? We really worked hard to move those low-level, low-impact people who were charged with criminal offenses but weren't really criminal into alternative solutions, and we've done that by the tens of thousands. It gave us the bandwidth to focus on the most dangerous people, and last year we sent 271 capital murder defendants or murder defendants to prison for about 7,500 years. It's the most time our office has gotten in 10 years, longer than I've been the DA. These results don't just happen. They are because we have great staff and the opportunity to lead these people and to train the generations of lawyers that have come through in my 2 terms has been a privilege. I'd like to continue the work because right now, what has really driven this election has been the public corruption cases investigated by the Texas Rangers and pursued by my office against the staff of Lena Hidalgo, who we allege steered an $11 million contract to a one-woman firm in violation of several Texas laws related to letting contracts out, what people who are vendors can know, should know, are told, etc. And I think that these cases should never have been swept under the rug, as was suggested by members of my party. How dare I prosecute a Democrat? I would remind them I've prosecuted plenty of Republicans too. Dr. Stephen Hotze, one of the highest profile Republicans, is charged with aggravated assault because he assisted former Captain Mark Aguirre of HPD in trying to prove that the 2020 election was stolen through ballot box stuffing. Instead, what they did is catch an AC repairman
in his van,
guard, run him off the road. Captain Aguirre stuck a gun to his head. They searched his home. There were no ballots.
Whoops.
So what I would tell people is, don't let 3 donors of my opponent buy the district attorney's office because I had the job of investigating and prosecuting public corruption. Those cases need to go through the system, and they shouldn't be tried at the ballot box. So to have Lena Hidalgo jump on my opponent's bandwagon, to have Rodney Ellis jump on my opponent's bandwagon, both were investigated. I would remind them they were not indicted. And that means for them, the system worked. What I would tell you for the 3 who are charged, let those cases work their way through the system. They're going to be prosecuted whether I'm the district attorney or not. And using the ballot box punitively to punish a DA for bringing a public corruption charge, here's what I'd tell everybody. If doing my job costs me my job, then I leave with clean conscience. I hope to win a 3rd term because I've tried very hard to earn it. But if the voters in this county want a different district attorney, well, then the county will go on and I will go on too. I would thank all the people who have supported me in this position, everyone with their blood, sweat, and tears. And the people who supported me, I know, are just looking for a safer county. The people supporting my opponent at $2 million, George Soros, a settlement guy who does settlement for PI lawyers, $500,000, and a woman in the Woodlands for $125,000. What are they buying? You know, I have about 2,000 donors, so I can tell you what you get with me. You get straight up justice. You won't always agree with decisions, and you won't always like the results. But we give the power to the people, through jury verdicts, through grand jury presentations, and I'm very proud of the work we've done. I think we've made Harris County safer, and I wanted to tell you thank you for bringing up the fact that the murder rate is going down, and I think part of that is because we're trying the heck out of murderers.
To be fair, thought I was going to find a different answer, and then I was like, maybe I'm just watching the news more today than I was back then. But
Well, thanks for being astute.
yeah,
You're a real journalist. You don't like get the answer you want and then fill in the.
yeah, no, I had no agenda. I was just curious.
All right. Well, thank you so much, D.A. Ogg, for
thank
joining us.
Absolutely.
Wonderful to have you on. Thank you so much.
Thank you, guys. Thanks for letting me run for something, and that's for helping Houston be safer.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, guys.
We'll close out another edition of the Dirty Verdict Podcast. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you next week.